We were yelling in the middle of my tiny living room, and honestly, I wasn't sure if I was more mad or just exhausted. You know those fights where everything you say feels like it's scraping against the other person's skin, and the air just gets so thick you could cut it with a knife? That was us. And then, right when I was about to throw my hands in the air and walk out the door, he just kissed me. Like, full stop, no warning, just shoved his mouth on mine to shut me up. If you'd told me that would ever happen, I'd have laughed in your face. Because, yeah, we fought. A lot. But somehow, in all the noise and frustration, that kiss landed on me like a surprise grenade, blowing up everything I thought I knew about us. Okay, let me back up a little. I'm Jake. I work in graphic design, mostly freelancing from home, which means my apartment doubles as my office, my chill zone, and sometimes a mess pit. It's not fancy, but it's mine. And then there's Tom, my boyfriend, my occasional tormentor, and the guy who somehow knows how to push every button I have. Tom's the kind of guy who's easy to laugh with, but just as easy to annoy the hell out of you. Tall, dark hair that's permanently messy, and this stubborn streak that runs so deep you'd think it was genetic. He's a teacher, which suits his patience, but between us, that doesn't always show. That night, we were supposed to have a quiet evening. No distractions, just a pizza and a movie. Except that plan unraveled fast. I was stressed about a deadline that got shoved up on me last second, and Tom was in one of those moods where everything bugs him. Traffic, the slow Wi-Fi, my constant switching between laptop and phone. Small stuff, but it snowballed. We started bickering about something stupid, whether to order pepperoni or just plain cheese, and before I knew it, we were both shouting over each other, words twisting sharp and quick. "You never listen," I shouted. He snapped back. "Maybe if you'd actually say what you mean, I would." And yeah, it sounds cliche, but it felt like we were just digging deeper into this pit of frustration neither of us wanted to be in. I remember pacing around the room, trying to cool off, but it didn't help. Tom stood by the couch, arms crossed, eyes locked on me like he was daring me to keep going. And honestly, I did. Because sometimes, when you're mad, you don't want to stop. You want the other person to get it, to understand what you're feeling without having to spell it out. Then, just as I opened my mouth to say something else, maybe the thing that would finally end us right there, he cut me off. Not with words, but with that kiss. It was like pressing pause on the chaos, a full stop in the middle of a sentence. His lips were soft but firm, and for a moment, everything stopped spinning. The anger, the frustration, all of it. I froze, caught completely off guard. And when he pulled back, his eyes were wide, almost vulnerable, like maybe he was as shocked as I was about what just happened. That's where it all started to shift. But honestly, if you'd asked me what was going on right then, I wouldn't have had an answer. I just knew one thing. I didn't want to fight anymore. I wanted to figure out how we got here, to whatever here was, and that's the story I'm still trying to piece together. His eyes didn't look angry anymore, just kind of open, like he'd peeled back a layer I didn't know was there. I swallowed hard, heart still hammering like I'd run a mile. "Did you just kiss me to shut me up?" I finally blurted, still trying to process what just happened. Tom shrugged, but there was a little smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. "Maybe," he said, voice low. Figured yelling wasn't doing either of us any favors. I laughed, a little breathless. Yeah, no kidding. We stood there for a beat, the noise of the argument fading into the background like static. It was weird. Like suddenly there was this quiet space between us that felt safe. I don't know how to explain it exactly, but everything that felt messy and tangled just softened. Then, without thinking, I stepped closer and reached for his hand. His fingers curled around mine before I could change my mind. It was a small thing, but for some reason, it felt huge. "Look, I'm sorry," I said, voice quieter now. "I didn't mean to blow up like that. It's just been a rough day." Tom nodded, squeezing my hand gently. "Me too. I hate fighting with you." We stood there like that for a minute, just holding on to each other, no need for words. Eventually, he pulled me down onto the couch beside him, and I let myself sink into that space, feeling the weight of everything start to loosen. So yeah, that kiss, awkward and impulsive as it was, ended up doing what neither of us could. It stopped the fight and reminded us we actually cared more than we were willing to admit in the middle of all the noise. After a while, Tom nudged my shoulder. "Wanna watch that movie now? I promise I won't criticize your choice this time." I grinned. "Deal, but only if you order the pepperoni." He rolled his eyes but didn't argue. "Fine, pepperoni it is." As the movie started playing, I glanced over at him. Despite the earlier tension, there was this softness in his eyes that made my chest tighten. I realized that sometimes the people we love don't just kiss us to shut us up. They kiss us because they don't want to lose us in the noise. And maybe, just maybe, that's enough to hold on to. The movie played on, but honestly, I was only half paying attention. My mind kept drifting back to that moment, the kiss, the quiet between us afterward. It wasn't just about stopping the fight anymore. It felt like an unspoken truce, like we were both saying, without words, that we still wanted this, however messy it might be. Midway through the film, Tom shifted closer, his leg brushing against mine. I didn't pull away. Instead, I let my hand rest on his knee, a subtle way of reconnecting without the awkwardness of words. He looked down, caught my gaze, and for a second, there was this flicker of something unguarded in his eyes. "Jake," he said softly, "do you think we fight because we care too much? Or because we're scared of what happens if we don't?" That caught me off guard. I blinked, trying to figure out where that even came from. "I don't know," I admitted. "I guess maybe both?" He sighed, a mix of frustration and something tender I hadn't seen before. "Sometimes I think I push you away, just so I don't have to admit how much I want you close." That hit me harder than I expected. Because the truth was, I'd been doing the same thing. Pushing, pulling, setting myself up to be disappointed before I could be hurt. Maybe that's why the fight felt so raw, because it wasn't really about pepperoni pizza or deadlines. It was about all the stuff we never said. I reached up, fingers brushing against his messy hair. "Tom, I don't want to fight with you. I want to figure this out. Together." He smiled, that slow, genuine grin that made my heart do this weird flip. "Me too." For a while, we just sat there, quiet and close. The movie faded into the background as we talked in whispers, sharing bits of ourselves we usually kept locked away. I told him about the stress at work, the deadlines that felt impossible, the fear that I wasn't good enough. He opened up about his own insecurities, how teaching made him doubt himself sometimes, how he worried about not being the partner I deserved. It was messy and imperfect, but it felt real. Like we were actually seeing each other, beyond the surface and the fights. Later, when the credits rolled, Tom pulled me into a hug, pressing his forehead to mine. "I don't want to be the guy who fights with you all the time." I laughed softly. "Then don't be." He smirked. "I'll try." We ended up falling asleep tangled together on the couch, the city lights spilling through the window. And for the first time in a long time, it felt like we were on the same side, even if the road ahead wasn't always going to be easy. The next morning, over burnt coffee and leftover pizza, I looked at Tom and realized something. Love isn't about never fighting. It's about what happens after, in those quiet moments when you choose to stay, to listen, and maybe kiss to shut each other up. Not to end things, but to start again. The morning light felt sharper than usual, sneaking through the thin curtains and landing right on Tom's face. He was still half asleep, hair a mess, that familiar crease between his eyebrows like he was trying to solve some impossible math problem in his dreams. I watched him for a bit, feeling this strange mix of warmth and nervousness settle in my chest. Last night had shifted something between us, but now that the sun was up, the real world was creeping back in. "Hey," I whispered, nudging him gently. He blinked, eyes slowly focusing on me. "Morning," I smiled, trying to keep the awkwardness at bay. "Coffee?" Tom grunted in agreement, pulling himself up and rubbing the sleep out of his eyes. The kitchen was small and cluttered with the usual empty mugs, a pile of mail, and a half-used jar of peanut butter. I started the coffee maker, and he leaned against the counter, stretching his arms overhead. So, I started. How do we make sure last night isn't just a one-off kiss to stop the fight moment? Because, honestly, I don't want us to keep circling back to yelling matches. Tom chuckled, but there was a seriousness in his gaze. Yeah, me neither. I guess we need to figure out how to talk without it turning into a war zone. I nodded, feeling the weight of that truth. Maybe we need to be more honest. Not just about the big stuff, but the small things, too. Like when something's bothering us before it blows up. Guess that means no more bottling things up, he said, taking a sip of the bitter coffee. No more. I agreed, but I'll warn you, I'm not exactly a master at this communication thing. He laughed, the sound lighter than it had been in days. Neither am I, but we can practice. That felt promising, even if kinda scary. Opening up isn't easy, especially when you've built up walls over years of habit. But maybe that's what made last night's kiss so important. It was a crack in those walls, a reminder that beneath all the frustration, there was something worth fighting for. Later that day, we decided to take a walk through the neighborhood, just to clear our heads. The air was cool, hinting at the coming fall, and the streets were quiet except for the occasional dog walker or jogger. Tom grabbed my hand without thinking, fingers threading through mine like a lifeline. You know, he said after a while, I've been thinking. Maybe we're scared because we've never really dealt with the stuff that scares us. I glanced at him, curious. What kind of stuff? Like, what if one of us messes up? What if I'm not the boyfriend you want? Or what if your work stress makes you pull away? I squeezed his hand gently. I've thought about that too, but maybe it's better to face those fears together instead of pretending they don't exist. He nodded slowly, and we walked in silence for a bit, the city hum fading into the background. When we got back to the apartment, Tom pulled me close and kissed me, not to stop an argument this time, but just because. It was softer, slower, full of something I couldn't quite put into words yet. Hope, maybe. Or maybe just the relief of knowing we weren't alone. That night, as we lay in bed, I realized that love isn't some perfect, smooth ride. It's messy, frustrating, and sometimes downright exhausting, but it's also about those moments when you decide to stay, to listen, and to try again, even when it's hard. And for once, I was okay with that. Because with Tom, even the fights felt like part of the story we were writing together. And that story? I wasn't ready to give up on it anytime soon. The next few days felt different. Not in some flashy movie montage kind of way, but in the quiet, almost invisible moments where things just clicked a little better. Like when Tom made me that terrible instant ramen, I swear he burnt a little but smiled like it was gourmet. Or when I stayed up late, sketching ideas for a project, and he didn't ask a million questions. He just handed me a cup of tea and sat nearby. It was still us, imperfect, a little chaotic, but the fights didn't hit the same level of explosion. And when things started to spiral, we caught each other earlier, talking instead of yelling, not always perfectly, but with way more patience than before. One evening, a couple of days after that kiss that stopped everything, we found ourselves sitting on the fire escape outside my apartment. The city was a jumble of noise and lights below, but up here, it felt quieter, like we'd escaped the chaos for a little while. Tom pulled his knees up to his chest and looked out over the street. You ever think about how weird it is that we ended up here, together? I laughed, the soundlight but honest. Yeah, I mean, I never pictured myself with someone like you. He shot me a mock-offended glance. What? Tall, sarcastic, and impossible to keep up with? Exactly, I grinned. He smirked. I guess that's why it works. For a moment, the only sound was the distant hum of cars and the occasional shout from a late-night passerby. Then Tom's voice turned softer. I was scared for a while, you know? That if we kept pushing, we'd break something that maybe wasn't meant to last. I turned to look at him, surprised by the seriousness. Yeah, I was scared too. He nodded. But then, that night, you kissing me to shut me up, it was like you reminded me we're not just fighting to hurt each other. We're fighting because we care. I felt my throat tighten. Yeah, it scared me how much I cared. Scared I might lose you. Tom shifted closer, his shoulder brushing mine. You won't. Not if I have anything to say about it. There was this raw honesty between us that made me want to believe every word. Because sometimes love isn't the grand gestures or perfect moments. It's admitting your fears, leaning into someone despite the risk. Days later, work chaos hit me again. A client changed their mind last minute, pushing my deadline into the next day, and stress bubbled up faster than I could handle. I was hunched over my laptop, fingers flying over the keyboard, when Tom walked in with a tired smile. Thought you could use a break, he said, holding out a cardboard box. Inside was a tiny, ridiculously expensive-looking cupcake covered in way too much frosting. I raised an eyebrow. What's this? Peace offering, he said, settling on the couch. And also a bribe so you don't work yourself into a breakdown. I couldn't help but laugh, the tension in my shoulders easing. You're ridiculous. True. But effective, he shot back with a grin. That night, as I took a bite of the cupcake, I realized something important. No matter how tough things got, or how many fights we had, there was this steady thread running through it all. A connection that didn't break. It wasn't perfect, and it wasn't easy. But it was ours. And honestly, that felt like more than enough. A few nights after the cupcake incident, Tom and I found ourselves sprawled on the couch again, this time with a takeout container between us and a playlist of old songs humming softly in the background. It was one of those rare evenings where the city noise felt like a distant hum, and I could finally catch my breath from the constant rush of deadlines and to-do lists. He looked over at me, eyes glinting with that familiar mix of mischief and something softer. You ever think about what we're building here? Like, not just the messy day-to-day stuff, but what this actually means? I tilted my head, curious. All the time. It's scary and exciting at the same time. Yeah, he said, nodding. I keep wondering if we're ready for that kind of commitment. Not just the let's be boyfriend and boyfriend thing, but the deeper stuff. The kind that makes you vulnerable in ways you didn't expect. I reached out, brushing a stray lock of hair from his forehead. I think we're more ready than we give ourselves credit for. You don't have to be perfect, and neither do I. Maybe it's just about showing up for each other, even when it's hard. He smiled, a little shy, and leaned into my touch. Showing up. I like that. That night, as we talked and laughed and shared little secrets, I felt like we were planting seeds for something real. It wasn't about grand declarations or perfect timing. It was about the messy, beautiful process of figuring it out together. But of course, reality doesn't pause just because you want it to. The following week brought its own challenges. Work got even more intense, with clients calling at odd hours and revisions piling up. Tom's own schedule shifted too, with extra meetings and grading that kept him up late. Stress started creeping in again, threatening to unravel the fragile calm we'd built. One evening, after a particularly long day, I came home drained. Tom was already there, sitting at the kitchen table with his laptop open, eyes tired but alert. Rough day? He asked without looking up. You have no idea, I muttered, dropping my bag by the door. He closed his laptop and stood, coming over to wrap his arms around me. Want to talk about it? I hesitated, the urge to vent battling with the exhaustion weighing me down. But then I realized I didn't have to carry it all alone. Yeah, I said softly. I think I do. We settled into the couch, and I let the words spill out. The deadlines, the pressure, the fear of not being good enough. Tom listened without interrupting, just holding me steady. When I finished, he kissed my temple and said, "We'll get through this." Together, like always. That simple promise felt like an anchor in the storm. A few nights later, something shifted again. We were sitting side by side, watching a dumb comedy neither of us was really paying attention to, when Tom reached out and took my hand. "Jake," he said quietly, "I know we've had our fights, and maybe we still will, but I want you to know I'm not going anywhere. I'm in this for the long haul." My heart thudded in my chest. "Me too." He smiled, and in that moment, all the uncertainty seemed to fade away. It wasn't about never fighting or never being scared. It was about choosing each other every damn day, no matter how messy it got. And honestly, that was more than enough to keep me going. A couple of weeks after that quiet moment, with Tom holding my hand and saying he was in it for the long haul, Life still managed to throw its usual curveballs. But instead of the usual tension building up and exploding into arguments, there was this new rhythm between us, like we'd found a way to catch ourselves before falling into old habits. It wasn't perfect, though. One rainy Friday night, I was sitting at my desk, the glow of my laptop screen the only light in the room, trying to finish a last-minute project. Tom was in the kitchen, humming something off-key while making dinner. I could hear the clatter of pans and the occasional curse when a spice jar refused to open. It was comforting, in a weird way. But then the power flickered and went out. I groaned, leaning back in my chair and rubbing my face. Seriously? Now? Tom poked his head around the corner. Looks like the whole block's out. Great timing. I sighed. The deadline was looming, and now I was stuck in the dark with no way to work. Tom came over, holding 2 candles. Come on, tonight's not about work. Let's just sit and, I don't know, do nothing. I hesitated. The pressure to finish was screaming in my head, but looking at him holding those candles like it was some grand gesture, I realized how much I needed this pause. We settled on the couch with the flickering candlelight casting soft shadows on the walls. No screens, no noise, just us. The silence wasn't awkward. It was kind of peaceful. After a while, Tom broke the silence. You know, I think we've been doing a lot of growing lately. Not just as a couple, but as people. I nodded, feeling the truth in his words. Yeah, I feel like I'm starting to understand what it means to really be with someone. He smiled. That slow, genuine smile that always made my heart skip. Me too. And honestly, it scares the hell out of me sometimes. Why's that? Because it means I have to let down my guard, trust you not to walk away when I screw up. I reached out, taking his hand again. I'm not going anywhere. He squeezed my hand gently. Good. Because I don't plan to either. That night, in the dark with nothing but candlelight, we talked for hours. About fears, hopes, the kind of future we wanted but rarely dared to say out loud. It was one of those rare nights that felt like a turning point. A few days later, I found myself walking home after a late meeting, the city lights reflecting off the wet pavement. I was tired, worn thin from juggling everything, but as I climbed the stairs to my apartment, I felt this warmth spread through me. Because there, waiting with that crooked smile and his usual messy hair, was Tom. He pulled me into a hug before I even had a chance to say hello. Hey, he murmured into my neck. Hey, I replied, feeling all the exhaustion melt away. We spent the evening curled up on the couch, talking about our days, sharing little victories and setbacks. And somewhere between the quiet moments and the soft laughter, I realized something important. Love isn't just about the big gestures or dramatic declarations. It's about showing up day after day in the small ways that mean the most. And despite everything, the fights, the stress, the uncertainty, I knew I wanted to keep showing up. For him, for us, because sometimes the strongest love stories aren't the ones without conflict. They're the ones where 2 people refuse to give up on each other, even when it's hard. And that's exactly the story we're writing, one imperfect, messy, beautiful day at a time. A couple of weeks after that rainy night with the power outage and candlelight talks, things between Tom and me were still unfolding in ways that surprised me. Not because we'd suddenly become some perfect pair who never argued. The truth is, that never really happens. But because we were learning how to navigate the messiness with a little more grace. Or, at least, we were trying. One Saturday afternoon stands out. We'd planned to spend the day out, maybe brunch, a walk in the park, some aimless wandering through the city. It was one of those rare days off where neither of us felt buried under work. But then, as we were getting ready, Tom's phone buzzed. An emergency at the school. One of his students had a family crisis, and Tom was asked to step in and help coordinate support. It wasn't huge news. Tom's always been the go-to guy for this kind of thing, but it meant the day was suddenly upended. I could tell the disappointment hit him hard, and I felt it too. We'd been looking forward to this little escape. I wanted to say something to make it better, but instead frustration bubbled under my skin. Figures, I muttered, more to myself than him. Tom caught the tone and looked at me, a little guarded. Hey, I'm sorry. I wish it was different. I took a breath, trying to keep the irritation in check. I know, it's just, I was really looking forward to today. He nodded, then smiled, that familiar half grin that always manages to soften whatever's going on. How about we shift the plan? You come with me to the school, help me sort things out, and then we grab dinner afterward? My treat. I hesitated. I wasn't exactly thrilled about spending my day at a school instead of exploring the city, but seeing how important this was to him, I swallowed the selfish part and agreed. That afternoon, walking through the school hallways, watching Tom interact with the staff and students, I saw a side of him that always amazed me. The way he cared so deeply, how he could make people feel seen even in the middle of chaos. It reminded me why I had fallen for him in the first place. When we finally left the school, the sun was dipping low, casting this warm glow over the streets. We ended up at a tiny diner down a side street, the kind of place with neon signs and vinyl booths. Over greasy fries and milkshakes, we talked about everything and nothing, the earlier frustration melting away. At one point, Tom reached across the table and caught my hand. "Thanks for coming with me today. It means a lot," I smiled, squeezing his fingers. "Honestly, I needed that reminder of why we're doing this." He laughed softly. "Me too." After dinner, we wandered back toward my apartment, the city buzzing around us like a soundtrack. When we reached the doorstep, Tom hesitated, then turned to me with that serious look he gets when he's about to say something important. "Jake, I've been thinking," he began, "about where we're headed. About us." My heart sped up a bit, partly because I was already guessing where this was going, partly because I wasn't sure I was ready. "I don't want to rush anything," he said, "but I want to keep building this, whatever this is. I want us to be a team through all of it, the good and the bad." I nodded, feeling a lump in my throat. "I want that too." He stepped closer, brushing a hand over my cheek, and then pulled me in for a kiss that was slow and sure and full of everything we'd been saying without words. When we pulled back, he grinned that lopsided smile. "So maybe next time we plan a day off that actually stays a day off?" I laughed. "Deal." That night, as I lay in bed replaying the day in my mind, I realized again how complicated love could be. It wasn't about avoiding hardships or pretending everything was perfect. It was about choosing to be with someone, day after day, through the unexpected twists and turns. With Tom, that choice didn't feel like a burden. It felt like coming home. Months passed, and with every one of them, Tom and I found new ways to grow, not just as a couple, but as individuals who were learning to show up for each other better. The fights didn't disappear, and honestly, sometimes they still hit harder than I wanted. But now they came with something different. A willingness to listen, to pause, to remember that beneath all the frustration, there was a person I loved sitting across from me. One rainy evening, we were back on that same fire escape, where we'd first had those deep talks. The city was cloaked in a soft drizzle, lights shimmering through the wet streets below. Tom pulled his jacket tighter around us, and I leaned into him, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat against my back. "I'm glad we didn't give up," I said quietly. He smiled, that warm, crooked grin that always made me feel like everything was going to be okay. "Neither am I. It's not about never fighting. It's about choosing each other even when it's hard." I turned to face him, searching his eyes. "Do you think we're ready for whatever comes next? The real stuff, the big steps?" He took my hand, lacing his fingers through mine. "I think we've been ready all along. We just had to learn how to trust it." There was something reassuring in that, knowing that love wasn't about perfection or grand gestures, but about the quiet commitment to keep showing up, to keep trying, to keep loving. Later that night, as we sat tangled on the couch, the city humming outside our window, I realized that the kiss that once stopped our fight wasn't an ending, it was a beginning. A reminder that even when words failed us, connection could speak louder. And in that imperfect, messy, beautiful space between us, I found something I'd been searching for all along. Home. Not a place, but a person. Not a moment, but a promise. We fought, we kissed, we learned. And in all of it, we chose each other, over and over again, And that's a love story worth holding on to.